When you clear out a large amount of emotional pain in a short amount of time, you'll find later in the day, once your emotions have settled, that answers pop into your mind. Answers which tell you on an emotional level things like why you reacted in a certain way in particular situations in the past, or why you acted the way you did in specific past situations, and even big answers like why you attract the wrong kind of people in your life, or an answer that I shared with you in a previous video which told me one of the big factors of why I used to self-harm. Whenever we use our guidance feelings to figure out how we truly feel, when we repeat the feeling to ourselves to build up the reaction from our guidance feelings, we are also repeating the feeling to ourselves to help us process them, which will help us come to understand that we actually do feel the feeling that we are repeating to ourselves. As adults, we learn how to label our feeling, but as children, we never gave a thought as to what we were feeling, as we just experienced them without thinking about the labels that we assigned to them. But when we grow into adults and our emotional palette fully develops, which I believe is around the age of 27 years old, in the years running up to 27, we can find that life gets really tough. Relationships can grow taxing and tiresome, and we can find ourselves either relying on our friends a bit too much or moving further away from them and the connections that we form with them over the years. As when our emotional palette does fully develop, we then have the ability to feel and experience the adult emotions that we would have felt as a child, but we couldn't back then due to our emotional palettes underdevelopment to produce those ranges of adult emotions. And it's this internal process that makes life really tough in your 20s and 30s, as we aren't even aware of the development of our emotional palette and that it causes extra emotional tension, pain and agony during our 20s and 30s. Being passive with your feelings. If you're around the age of 27, then what you won't know is that life does get easier the older you get. Some of the reasons for this are, you'll learn how to live with your painful emotions, meaning you get to learn what your emotional pain will allow you to achieve and what they stop you from even trying, allowing you to keep your emotional pain at a particular, dare I say it, manageable level. You also pick up on coping strategies that work for you. And from your 30s to your 50s, your adrenal glands, the glands that are responsible for producing adrenaline and the stress hormone known as cortisol, begin to shrink in size, which will have a knock-on effect of making you feel calmer than you did in your 20s. But these are all passive ways to cope with emotional pain that we live with. Being active with your feelings of pain. The opposite of the passive way is to actively find ways to work and deal with your emotional pain and not just cope with it. Active ways to deal with emotional pain include things like what we're doing in the self-help system, and other active ways include counselling and therapy. By trying active ways to deal with your emotional pain allows us to explore our emotional pain and to process it, and where needed, to burn up the energy of the feelings we experience. As we know, we're currently experiencing how roaring out anger and animalistic feelings burns up the energy of those feelings, allow them to be actively dealt with so they leave us alone. But the opposite end of roaring out anger is that crying also burns up the energy of sadness, heartache and disappointments that we experience in life too. Which is something that every child knows without even consciously realising it, that crying makes us feel better. And also, regular exercise is excellent for dealing with stress levels and, speaking in emotional terms, keeps you grounded and keeps you in your body, meaning that you're not up in your head all the time. What are feelings? All the feelings that we have aren't the labels that we assign to them, but all our feelings are energy that we experience, which is exactly what we did as children. When it comes to using our guidance feelings to figure out how we truly feel, we must label those feelings correctly to actively process the energy of the feelings we experience. And it's in this processing of our feelings that an invisible process begins to occur, which is that when we experience the good feelings from our guidance feelings, we also invoke our emotional immune system, allowing the energy of the feelings we are labeling to not hurt us. This is why when we are correctly labeling our feelings like, I feel scared, I am angry, I feel terrified and I am full of rage, we won't experience those feelings. But our emotional immune system protects us from the feeling hurting us and even from experiencing the feeling itself. And when you reach the end of this self-help system, and when you've dealt with all the emotional pain on the different levels within you, your emotional immune system will help you forget the pain that you used to live with and how it affected you back then. And this can make you feel like a completely different person compared to who you used to be. But as we get closer to the end of using our guidance feelings method, we will still feel emotional tension, pain and even agony, and maybe with the same intensities that we've always experienced it. With this in mind, does this mean that the method of using guidance feelings doesn't have long-lasting effects? And does roaring out animalistic feelings not work that well? My tonsillitis and I, my first lessons in physical pain. From the early years of my childhood and into my late teens, I got tonsillitis a few times every year. If you've ever had tonsillitis, you'll know that whenever you swallow food or drink, it also feels like you are swallowing glass. Our family doctor always told me that I would one day grow out of having tonsillitis. And when I was 19 years old, our doctor retired, so I saw another doctor who said, "Yep, you should have had them out years ago, so I'll book you an appointment with a specialist." The year after I had my tonsils removed, and living a full year without having tonsillitis, I woke up one morning and when I swallowed, it felt like I was swallowing glass again. Because I knew this pain so well, I was convinced that I had tonsillitis, without actually having any tonsils. I wasn't the brightest back then. I booked an appointment with our GP and she said that I just had a throat infection. I asked why it still felt that I had tonsillitis, and the GP told me that tonsillitis and throat infections affects the same muscles in my throat, which means that when I swallow, I'll experience the same kind of pain. This same process is what's happening with you each time you work through and clear up your emotional pain. As when you have a session of working in your inner world, making you feel much better than you did before you started your session, when the emotional pain returns and you experience the same kind of emotional pain and even with the same intensities, this can make you draw the conclusion that this doesn't work. Just like I drew the conclusion that I had tonsillitis even though I didn't have any tonsils. Why emotional pain returns. The reason why emotional pain returns after a session of working hard to clear it up is to indicate that you have more discoveries to make and more work to do in your inner world. And the reason your emotional pain feels the way that it usually does is because of the way your body holds on to your emotional pain. If you hold your emotional pain in your chest, then emotional pain will return to this area to indicate that you have more work to do in your inner world. If you hold emotional pain in your solar plexus, then at some point emotional pain will return to this area to indicate that you have more work to do within your emotions. But even though it can be disheartening to work through emotional pain one day, making you feel good feelings, and then have the same emotional pain return the next day, even though it can make you lose confidence in the way you are working with your emotions, and even though it can make you sick and tired of the process of feeling good and making brighter plans for the future, and then feeling bad the next day making you have to say goodbye to those nice plans, I always saw it as a good thing that the indication that I had more work to do in my inner world was that I felt the same emotional pain in the same areas of my body and with the same or similar intensities. Imagining another way, we get the indication that we have more work to do in our inner world. Imagine that the other way that your emotional self indicated to you that you had more pain to work with was that you felt emotional pain in different areas of your body. And the more emotional pain you actively dealt with caused you to feel pain in a higher part of your body. So, if you experience emotional pain just below your belly button, after working through that pain, then you felt it in your solar plexus. And if you naturally experience emotional pain in your solar plexus, once you've dealt with that pain, you then feel it in your chest. And this shows you that you are making progress. But earlier in this video, I spoke about the passive ways that we deal with our emotional pain, which included getting to know what our emotional pain will allow us to do so we can keep it at a particular level within us, And what our emotional pain won't allow us to do, as in doing certain things makes our emotional pain increase in intensity. We get to learn the passive ways of coping with our emotional pain over time by living with them. And if our emotional self changed the area of our body where we experience our emotional pain, we would have to live with it for so much longer, as we would have to get to know what this new emotional pain in this new area of our body will allow us to do and what causes it to grow in intensity. Though it is an absolute pain in the arse, that the indication that we have more work to do in our inner world is that we feel the same kind of emotional pain with the same intensities and in the same area of our body. It would be a lot worse if our emotional self changed the area of our body that we experience painful feelings just to let us know that we are progressing in our active ways of dealing with emotional pain. And I think that this is quite a comforting thought. Other signs that you are making progress when actively dealing with emotional pain. I started this video by saying that when we clear up large amounts of emotional pain, the good feelings we experience allow us answers to pop into our minds. This will include things like why we felt bad when Tim told us we were useless, or why in our past we always shied away from trying new things. But it can also answer big questions, like why we keep attracting the same kind of negative people into our lives, or why we often find ourselves in the same or similar painful situations. These are indications that we are making progress in working through our emotional pain. These types of answers are called emotional answers, as the feelings that we experience whenever we receive an answer like this is similar to what we describe as a light bulb moment. As a light bulb moment is close to experiencing inspiration that gives answers to our problems. And when we get that inspiration, we cannot deny that it is our own personal truth. Another sign that you are making your way through your emotional pain and making progress in processing it is that when you are watching TV or a movie or listening to music, that you hear a line said or sang that reflects what you are going through, and even maybe gives you an answer that is personal to you, which sheds insight onto why you experience particular things like being so shy when meeting new people. And this is one of the reasons why I always encourage you to learn how to listen to your good feelings whenever you experience them, and do things that will move you closer towards pleasure whilst holding on to your new good emotions. As when you feel good and are doing something to relax, this is the time when your emotional self will give you emotional answers as to why you reacted in certain ways in the past, and even why particular things happen to you in your life. I'll end by saying that in the next couple of videos, we're going to be dealing with the pain caused by small situations that happen in life that cause us to experience strong and big negative emotional reactions, which is commonly known as being emotionally triggered. And these videos will also contain a lot of new information, as in order to figure out how to deal with those small situations, we must lift the lid on what it means to be triggered, which is a term I hate, by the way. We must also learn the truth about the law of attraction, and we must see the truth behind what has been told to us whenever we try to manifest something into our lives. Which I'm not saying manifesting things into your life doesn't work for you, as I'm not that arrogant. But what I am positively sure of is that manifesting into my life never worked for me. And more importantly, I know why it didn't work for me, as I understand the internal process of what's happening when I used to try and manifest things into my life, which I will share with you in an up and coming video. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.